All right, we're back today. We're excited. We got a whole crew here of Taproot employees. We got Lee Butoff on my left, and we got Jamie Hunt, who is our in-house food specialist. Would you say? But you had come from a culinary background. You've been a chef. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what your experience is in this industry?
Yeah. So I was probably 18 years old. Actually, I was 18 years old. Went away to college and it didn't work out for me.
You weren't the only one. You were the only one.
Yeah. So I quickly had to pivot. And, I'd come from a sports background and also an Italian family that always cooked. So I'm like, I guess I'll go get a job at a restaurant,
right?
So I started washing dishes. And the restaurant industry is interesting because it's a lot like a sports team. There's a lot of different components of it. Everybody's got to do their job. And it's also, you're sweating, you're under a lot of pressure. It has a lot of parallels to sports. So I just naturally kind of worked in there. And then all of a sudden I'm washing dishes and the chef goes, "Hey, you're a good worker. Do you want to make salads?" And to go out of a dishwashing station and come up to be able to make a salad in a restaurant is like, you don't even need to give me any more money. You don't, just heck yes, I'll make salads,
Sure.
And then just kind of started to progress from there. And that's when I kind of meshed I didn't realize how much I liked working with my hands, but also like the medium of food,
right?
Because I'd always watched my grandpa make red sauces out of stuff that he grew in his garden and stuff. So just kind of bumped up and progressed from there. And then I was able to start to make a career from it.
So diving into it, that was your start of your culinary experience. But you've cooked for other people, obviously, in restaurant style. You owned your own restaurant. Yep. You worked for a big company like Sysco too, doing some stuff for them. What was your position there for, if you don't mind me asking?
At Sysco?
Yeah.
So what I did, because my wife and I owned a restaurant 12 years prior, part of what Sysco's business model is they provided, through the sales process, they provided value. I worked on a team of people that were that value for Sysco. They had people that went out and, sold food, took the order, but inside Sysco, there was a team. I worked directly with the chef, and they called me a business resource consultant. So my job was to come in, look at people's menu, help them food cost, what their menu items costed at, put together a menu mix, see if that menu that they were selling was profitable. And then also I got to work with the chefs to come up with and find new ingredients. What are the trends out there? Because it's amazing how, especially where the restaurant is, you get a lot of people that get stuck in their ways and they find themselves not as profitable as they could be because they start to lose a customer base as they pass away or through other things that life experiences. Our job was to keep those restaurant owners profitable and fresh. So we get to find out the newest ingredients on the market, come up and get them.
So in a typical restaurant, what's that breakdown of how much food that they're sourcing from local farmers versus a Sysco? And I know we plan on chatting a little bit about farm to table stuff, but typical restaurant, what does that look like?
I think it depends. It depends widely on the business model. But let's look at something like a small local chain restaurant where you might have, 5 restaurants that you've started out. A lot of that is sourced through a place like Sysco. And because you have that buying power, it's used as leverage. So they rely on Sysco's a lot. And that's how they're successful. If you take a standalone mom and pop shop, we call them, and you look at that, it makes sense for those mom and pops to use a Sysco for things like sugar, for things like flour, for that. But you'll find a lot more mom and pop standalones being able to use a little bit more local produce. They don't have the higher volume, so it's easier for smaller farms to keep up with things like that.
Is that a consistency issue as you get to 2, 3, 4, 5 restaurants? They've got to be consistent across all of them.
Yeah. It's like the McDonald's, the Roy Kroc, you can get a Big Mac across the
consistency.
Country. The consistency is huge for chain style restaurants.
It's something that I think is a challenge in this industry and is kind of where we've gotten to because of that. Right. And we've seen like monocropping, like the certain potato that they use for their fries. Right. And how it can reap, that consistency is everything. And that's what they want to be known for, but comes with its downsides. And what if something happened to that crop that year where just one specific disease came in and wiped it out? Then what happens?
Yeah.
I want to kind of go back to and something that you said earlier about your background with Sysco. Is it a challenge if you get to have a dish as a restaurant owner that is just like your signature dish, right? Where do you think you bring in the other things, like the new items that, cause you want to bring people back in for that steak or whatever your signature dish is? I would imagine it's a tough thing to change out some of the things that you're really notorious, known for versus trying new things. And I could imagine it's kind of like Rolling Stones just playing the same set list every time. Yeah. You know what I mean? And
absolutely,
where Fish gets to, play the same song, but it's in a different chord progression or a different jam length, and so it doesn't, I would imagine it wouldn't get as boring. Did you ever find yourself kind of struggling with that balance between your signature dish and then trying something new or branching out?
I think I do get bored of things in general,
right?
But once I understood how my business wanted to be and how I wanted to shape that, I actually moved above food and started thinking about things completely differently. And so that I was looking at trying to make everything like we talked about, the consistency of it. That was my main focus, is trying to get everything so consistent. So I didn't have boredom because I was always teaching other people how to be consistent. I was always looking at the ingredients in there. But I think what you're asking more also is, how do we keep a menu fresh? How do we keep that moving? Is I would always break it out and look at a menu mix of something. What's not selling?
Right.
Okay. Why isn't it selling? And, so then we have our salespeople, our servers go out and say, let's try to push this menu item.
Right.
And if people aren't ordering it, then we have to ask why. But I usually use those isolated areas in a couple spots in my drink menus, in my my appetizer section. If I have pizzas or sandwiches or burgers, in those different sections, and what's my least selling item in there, then that gives me a chance to recreate, because I'll take my least selling item and I'll have a slot open in my menu and I'll say, okay, now it's time to create again.
Right.
And that's where we get the feedback from our customers. Okay. What would you like to see? We run contests and do things like that.
Interesting.
So what restaurants are you eating at these days? Who's doing interesting stuff, maybe around here, or, a little bit broader geographic range, but what's exciting you right now?
There's a couple levels in that excite me. One, I cook the majority, I would say 90% of the time at home. So when I just get to go out to eat, I get excited about that. Right. So usually I'm picking, I personally don't love local chains. So that's the first, or I don't like chain restaurants. So I'm not usually, picking an Applebee's or one of those big corporate chains is not in my top priority. I'm usually looking at a place that I can sit down and expect service, but then it really goes from there. Like the family's with me a lot of times, so I'll make my decision based off of that. And, some of the local places that I like going to Gilda's. That's one of my favorite. I think they always are fairly consistent. Have a good glass of wine that matches with the food that I'm getting, and it's not super stuffy. So something like that I look for. I've gone over, Osteria Salina in Auburn, Italian. I get to go out. I don't see a ton of people that I know. So I'm not, a lot of times when I go out to eat, I'm not out to be social. I'm out to eat, so I'll hop over there. But I think the best restaurant that I can't necessarily make my budget go to all the time. There's I look at I don't know. This isn't really near here, but it's Stone Barns. That whole group is just changing the way people eat. It's not my budget because it's not close to here, but also the restaurants are kind of out of the everyday budget for where I'd eat. But they're really looking at food as a farm. They're looking at it as people need nourishment, and they're actually designing and saying, people eat for nourishment, but how can we make that food taste better?
Right.
But also be profitable at it.
Yeah.
A lot of times restaurants they have a hard time mixing those two. Mm-hmm. They'll throw out quality to be profitable. They'll throw out, customer service to be, they'll throw out all these things. In a lot of times the food is what suffers when restaurants are trying to be profitable.
When so you joined the team here, and we do vegetables and stuff like that at our farm. And I think, some of the experiences that we've gone down and learning some of this and how to move the material is, do you think like the average homeowner who maybe, is trying to experience and get into new things, one of the challenges is like what to do with this new thing, right?
Yeah.
And then, how do we, give ideas or come up with new things to share that to other people can get into it. I find that sometimes it's, from what we've seen on our cart, it's sometimes different. Obviously you're giving your stuff to chefs too, and they treat it how they treat it, but talk about maybe a little bit of not disconnect, but just the challenges of selling different varieties of fruits and veggies. And
yeah, it's weird. I mean, the most asked question that I get when we have vegetables or any product that I make is, what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And that's such a foreign question for me that sometimes it's hard to answer, because I'm naturally thinking about what I'm going to do with this product or where I'm going to fit it, how am I going to use it. But so I have to take a step back and I have to look at and try to give people tools that allow them the freedom to be creative too.
Right.
Because
you want to put them in a box and keep them there.
And people want a recipe. They feel comfortable for it.
Right.
Cooking's more than recipe.
Yeah.
Right? It's a feeling. And if I can teach people that, if it's green and it's really soft, then you don't need to cook it for 6 hours when you cook it. That's a quick saute. And if we can start to we can start to look at food as not a recipe necessarily, as just when it's here, what categories do I put it in, and what do I do with it? I think people will be able to use those unique ingredients, or those little bit different ingredients that we try to strive to give them. They'll be able to fit them in pretty easily.
Sorry, excuse me. The bat pig just came in here, interrupted our podcast. You know,
we haven't even done any recipes, and he's getting hungry.
I know. He's like, I hear you guys talking about food up here. Well, hopefully, it won't be too much of a distraction here. But hi, Bruce. Hi, buddy. Yeah. Well, that's a great point. You know, I don't think. Me, I don't come from a really good culinary background. I actually, experience food by trying new things. Like, I like that on its own. Where could I put it in another area where I would like it too? And so you're right, though. It's like, are you a person who follows like the step-by-step ingredient, or are you kind of like, actually, you know what? I like rosemary better than oregano, and let's go heavier on this, and I think that's what's so amazing about food is the expression that you can get and the unlimited amount of concoctions. You certainly know the ones that you don't like too. Right. And you're like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Like there's a few things I don't like, but I stay away from anchovies. Anchovies are like, they make me want to vomit when I smell them, I look at them, everything. Right. But if another chef cooked anchovies for me, it might add a complexity to a sauce. As long as I didn't see it or know that they in there, I'd be like, this is the best sauce I ever tasted. Right? Yeah. So it's a lot of it is perception, and what you're looking at in food and what to expect.
It is a mental thing. Yeah. I will agree with you on that sometimes, and I've been burned like that, or like, I always didn't like it. Well, it's probably I didn't like it because it was horribly cooked for me originally, which my brain now attached that to a memory.
Yeah.
But when somebody can do it all right or put it together in a way, and it's good, that's always chop, right?
I was talking to my cousin this weekend, and she's like, my mom couldn't cook pork chops at all.
Right.
And because I brought them dinner, and she's like, I didn't know pork chops could actually taste good.
Right.
They're not dry. They're flavorful,
Yeah.
So what about exotic foods, exotic, ingredients for a foodie, restaurateur to serve to people? Like, how does that go over? Like, do they try to use exotic stuff that people have never heard of before? Or is it best to use core ingredients?
I think you always got to have core ingredients. However, if you can add like a plus one and make somebody taste something that they've never tasted before, that's key. So, when I'm looking at things, how I look at it is, how do I make people super comfortable and move them just enough? Mm-hmm. Because that's who I am as a chef. There's chefs out there that are using those exotic ingredients in every single dish, but their market's different. They're going after those people that are seeking them out. So I'm always trying to be really user friendly for the people around me and what they eat, but I'm always trying to source that exotic.
Would you consider, we obviously do a lot of black garlic here on the farm. Like, where is that on the exotic scale? Obviously, garlic is used, as a core ingredient in a lot of stuff, but where is the black garlic? And maybe a quick definition of what black garlic is may be helpful for the listener.
Yeah. So black garlic, we grow great organic garlic. We dry it out when we pick it in August, the beginning of August. We dry it out for a couple weeks. And then we bring it through a cure process where we hold it at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. And during that time, what happens is the garlic starts to turn black. That's where it gets its name from. But during that process, it's called a Maillard reaction. And the garlic actually changes a black color because the sugars are naturally in that garlic start to caramelize. The texture becomes a lot softer and really takes that sting bite out of the garlic. So I would consider black garlic that we have here as like an exotic ingredient. And the reason is because it came from a Korean old way that the Koreans used to save their garlic for longer and cure it. And the other reason is because not a lot of people know of it. A lot of times when I'm coming up with exotic ingredients or ideas, the first thing I do is go to Google. You know?
Right.
If Google doesn't have much on it, and I ask maybe 4 or 5 friends if they've heard of it, I'm like, oh, this is tasty, and it's new, it's exotic, and kind of figure out what to do with those ingredients from there.
Yeah. Well said. It's kind of like that caramelized onion, right? It takes the bite out of a raw onion. Exactly. And gives it that softer texture. You get that browning when you caramelize it and brings out the sugars really in it, right? And it just adds a whole new flavor complexity in garlic. And I love garlic too, but my biggest gripe about it is when it's in that raw bite form, just like an onion. And I love onions in my sandwich, but like you're like got dragon breath after the whole afternoon, right? This really kind of like takes that away, and it's much more, it's smoother. It's kind of like got that, like I think you've described it as that figgy consistency, and then just the overall health benefits because of this as well, right, which is crazy. So it's got way more antioxidants in it. And
we remove some of that water.
Yeah.
The antioxidants just bump right up, in there. So you get more bang for your buck.
How about recipes for black garlic? My brother, I just had to send him more black garlic. He's like, I'm in love with this stuff. He's like, one of the things they do is saute it with shiitake mushrooms and shallots right next to a steak. He's like, it's absolutely amazing. But, that seems pretty easy. Cut it up, saute it with some other stuff. But where else should be people looking at it? I know we've used it on pizza and stuff before.
Yeah, pizza. One of my favorite things to do is make a compound butter out of it. So I get butter out, arbitrary amount. How much do you want to make?
Right.
So I get a stick of butter out, soften that up. Because the black garlic has umami flavors, I also use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce in this butter mixture, and I just whip black garlic, Worcestershire sauce together, make it nice and soft. I can put it back in the fridge, or I can use it right from there with bread on top of steaks as a compound butter. But here's the thing that I learned in talking to people about black garlic. I was sitting home one night and somebody bought our black garlic, and they're like, oh my gosh, it didn't work well for Caesar dressing because because the black garlic turned that creamy, nice yellow color you think of a Caesar dressing. It turned it like a brown poo color. They're like, so I tell people you can use black garlic where you can use regular garlic in most places, but use your common sense. If it's black, it's gonna turn it a brown color. So
visually, it might not look that appetizing, even though it might be really tasty, though, in that. But we eat with our eyes,
we
don't we?
So much.
Yeah.
And that's what we run into in this world, this food world with a lot of our vegetables. We're taught to eat those perfect. Like
no blemish.
Can't have a dimple on it. Can't have any black spots, scarring, anything like that. So, as working on a farm now, that's what I'm trying to educate people as well. Just because it has a blemish on it, cut it out. It doesn't make it taste. It might taste better than what you're used to eating in a store.
Right?
Because our soil composition is different. Because it hits sun instead of maybe a ton of just fertilizers and on natural light,
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of this is kind of, again, we went down this road because the farmer knew he had to grow something really pretty if he wanted to move it. Right. I think they've carried that. And so how do we grow the best looking thing for the cheapest? And when you combine all that stuff, like you get really like a piece of fruit that looks amazing, but almost has no nutritional value at that point, and it's oversized from what it is. And, but Lee, you had a question.
Well, yeah, if we could maybe turn towards the farm to table conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, the question I have is like, we hear about craft beer all the time, but what the heck does craft beer mean? Like, I think it's got a lot of connotations. It can mean size. It can mean quality. Sometimes, a lot of cases, it doesn't mean quality. It means size. I feel like farm to table is the same thing. Like, what the heck does that actually mean? Both from, maybe going to a restaurant to your home, how do those differ?
My honest opinion is that it's marketing. When we use the word, farm to table, or we use farm fresh, a lot of that where we are now is marketing. I know the intention that it started in, and the intention that it started in is that, restaurants were using a 15-mile radius to go and say, where can I find beef within 15 miles? Where can I go find my vegetables, my sugars, my everything that it takes to make out of this restaurant? Where can I find it within 15 miles? Because people understood the concept and how that could actually change the food industry, it jumped the shark into marketing. And I think what it means now really is, a farm grew it and it went on their table. But we know that everything starts at a farm, vegetables or whatever. It's kind of become mainstream.
Do you see the low hanging fruit of a menu ends up being farm to table, the salad, the beets, the things you can get pretty easily? Because I've got to assume it adds to the cost of now having to find all that stuff. And you talk about consistency.
Yeah.
How hard is it to be a consistent farm to table restaurant?
I think, especially in I'll call our area a little bit rural, where we don't have heavy population densities walking by or driving by our shops, it makes it super hard to do that. It's eye-opening to me as a chef when I was trying to source Finger Lakes ingredients, that I had a hard time in the Finger Lakes sourcing local ingredients because the true value of the ingredients were going to New York City, where they would be able to pay that price and be able to move that product. So it was, kind of a shock. I was like, wait a second, I can't get any cornmeal that was grown over on Seneca Lake because a restaurant in New York City just bought their whole field's worth of cornmeal for the year. That started to really change my perception of what farm to table meant, and started to say, okay, we started a movement, but now the marketing teams have taken over with using that a little much. I do like there's some newer concepts coming out there, and it's like snout to tail when they're moving into it now. So they're bringing in entire, in smaller restaurants are bringing in entire pigs, and they're saying, what can I do with the snout all the way to the tail? Whereas a lot of times those things would be discarded and not used,
thrown away.
Is the tail a garnish?
Yes.
Fried garnish on the top.
Fried tail. Yeah. Or the server signs the table with it dipped in ink. We could go that far.
So would you expect a a farm to table restaurant to have like no Sysco food in it? Like, where do you think that balance is from a normal restaurant to a food to table restaurant?
Yeah, I think that
You'd have to have a small menu, probably, right, to really pull that off.
You would have to pull that off. You would have it, and I wouldn't expect to not to have a Sysco in even those types of restaurants, because it is an easy supply chain to get some things in there. But I'll tell you that that there's really, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, where would I like to eat? There's really a large jump in where I'd want to eat. I like to pay, if I go out with two people, I like to pay probably, and this includes alcohol, $70 to $100 on a tab. I can find a lot of places in that. I can find a lot of places that go up to 150 to 200 that I'd rather drop down to that tier. So I think there's people that are trying to be something they aren't. And where I am with that question is that the price doesn't always dictate the quality. But there's people that are doing farm to table really well out there, in their complete menu is that, and you have to seek them out. But there's that middle level where they're not, they have an identity crisis. They're trying to do farm to table, and they have processed something in there. It's just
it's not a consistent throughout the whole.
What about friends of ours, the Legos, who do Elderberry Pond? Like, where do you see them? Because they grow a lot of their own food and stuff over there. Like,
it's amazing. Yes.
And I think that's what I was going to get into, is like, you almost have to build that into the restaurant itself. Like, how much can you grow of your own to supply versus you having to go piecemeal and find all this other stuff. Now, you might have to do that for the beef if you're really focusing on vegetables and things like that. But right, and that's kind of like our hope a little bit at some point, maybe, that we can do that. But that requires planning and succession planting and making sure you have because otherwise you have a million tomatoes when you don't want a million tomatoes. They only need like 100 per week or whatever it is. But that could be a challenge, couldn't it?
Yeah, it can, because you want to. I think when you look at the restaurant and how people are eating, is that you have to have a certain amount of people come through your restaurant weekly,
right,
or daily if you're only open a couple of days. But you also have to rely on, either if you're growing it, you've got to rely on having enough for it, or if you're having the help purveyors. And when you go outside the larger distributors, and I've seen farm after farm, they try to build these co-ops with other farmers, but it's really hard to get fresh product into restaurant doors.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, going back to the farm to table, the essence of how it started, the 15 miles.
Right.
People always jump the 15 miles, but really, 15, 20 miles, if you can find people that you can partner with that bring in, can make.
Well, how do the seasons successful. How do the seasons affect farm to table and be able to source stuff year round? And, which we get into a second question of something we've been dabbling in is, flash freezing of food, freeze drying of food. Like, is that considered farm to table?
I'd say 100%. It is. It's the creative people that are as a restaurant that you're able to work with that can stretch those seasons, It goes back to that snout to tail concept. Just because the tomato's fresh and it's awesome, in mid-August at its peak, smart farmers and people are trying to stretch that tomato as long as they can. So however they do that, and then it gets back onto your table is farm to table. They just might add another process in it. Doesn't mean that it's processed food. It's a process where you still have natural ingredients and that. So I would say for sure.
Like the extenuation, like our products, let's say like our hot sauce,
Yeah.
Extending that or making a bunch of stuff when you have a really high yield of something and being creative with it to make it extend. What is so kind of a full circle here? We went on the craft beer, and defining that. Is it like based on size, and maybe like farm to table might mean like farm size, and maybe attached with kind of the ethics of organics or non-organics, or is it just coming from a pig mill, with thousands of pigs versus, all right, hey, this is a small farm, grass-fed pigs out in pasture. Do you think, does any of that matter? Do you think, not to get into a debate about the proper way of processing animals, a humane way in the food industry versus like, we know there's bad ones out there, but without getting into that, do you think that matters at all?
That's a really good question. And for somebody like myself, it doesn't matter, because I know by walking in a door, if people, what's happening within that business,
right.
As far as, are they really using farm to table, or are they marketing it? Are they sourcing ingredients sustainably? I know generally when I walk in the door. I think that, and I think where we are as a society is that people are becoming more conscious of it. Once people are conscious of it, they start to drive the market of it. And this is really interesting, is this craft small movement of be it restaurants, be it beer,
cannabis, right?
Cannabis.
Yeah. We were talking about that.
Candle companies, whatever it is, when they start small and they work up, that's where the trends are. You look at these small craft restaurants that are, farm to table, or, younger farms. That's where the trends are going to move into the Applebee's or the Anheuser-Busch's.
Yeah.
They're really like, there's these small businesses that are like think tanks for these large corporations. And it's always a bummer to see I've been in the industry, at least the food industry, long enough where you can see where these trends started. And then, 15, 20 years later, they're on Applebee's menu.
Yeah.
And you're like,
McDonald's is now organic on all their stuff, right?
Yes.
And then, so that cuts out the organic purveyors that were doing it ahead of time, in a sense. And I've seen this with General Mills and their, their organic wheat and all that. Yeah, whatever, and trying to, that to me, it seems more of the marketing ploy that we talked about earlier, and trying to not lose market share. And we've seen this across all industries to some degree, especially right now with.
Yeah. Well, going back to like the flash freezing, right? Like we bought this great freezer that can flash freeze stuff for us. It seems like we grew up and like frozen vegetables were bad, right? They came in this bag, they're full of ice, and like those were considered not good for you. Right. Is that true? Like, is that actually a true statement, or are there degrees of that being a true statement? Like where do we fall in comparing to some of the stuff that we're trying to do up here?
So if done right, frozen vegetables aren't necessarily bad for you, or can have the same value as a really fresh vegetable for the most part. In until recently, I'd say recently being maybe 10 years, the technology of freezing vegetables was really good, was at a commercial scale only. So big, huge, the size of 10 rooms where they're cutting vegetables and they're bringing it through a conveyor and they're blast freezing these. And when they're blast freezing them, the vegetables are actually, their cells don't break down. So they haven't been blanched, so they're not losing the vitamins necessarily. Now, this is relative. Anytime you do a process to a vegetable, you lose something, right?
Even cooking it, right?
Yeah, even cooking it. Anytime you touch them, it's just how it works. But that was the best way to do that, and that technology was there, and they used that for a while. Well, is when we started doing and looking at farm to tables, the chefs are like, wait a second, I have these people, these smaller farms that can't get this 100 pounds of vegetables that, would take 10 seconds to run through this machine, and the factory doesn't want to work with them. But how do we do this on a smaller commercial level? So that's a long way of saying that the technology is now here where smaller size farms can access that technology to be able to freeze vegetables and keep that at its freshness really well.
Can I ask a question? What the heck do you mean by the cell walls don't break down? Like what's that got to do with it?
So basically the cell walls allow the structure of the plant to hold its moisture, and within that moisture, a lot of the flavor and vitamins and minerals are held within that moisture. During a slow freezing process, that water in the cell expands when it's really slow and breaks that cell. Then it's okay when it's frozen, but the second it's not frozen,
it's like
that moisture just
like a steak bleeding away. Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Right.
Is that like freezing it in your, like what would happen if you froze it in your home refrigerator freezer? The walls would break down versus some of the equipment that we've looked at. It doesn't do that.
Because it does it so quickly. Yeah. It doesn't give it that time. It does it so completely, and it removes the heat from the product rather than just making the product cold.
Yeah, for a regular fridge, if you cook something and then put it in your freezer, it takes hours slowly freezing it, right? I mean, where this is doing it so quick, it's pretty cool. The Inox shock freezer.
Yeah,
and it's probably our most versatile piece of equipment we have on the farm here, just because of all the things besides freezing.
Yep.
What else can I do, Jamie?
So we've started to grow mushrooms. We started to look into that and see what that. So in the mushroom process, we actually have to pasteurize some of the substrates that we use for mushrooms. This allows us to pasteurize, which pasteurization is just holding a certain temperature for a length of time. We'll keep it at that, but there's charts, they pasteurize milk, right? But they don't cook it. They just hold it at a temperature. So we have to do this with our grains that we're going to grow the mushrooms on to start them. So some people use they use double boilers. They use, pressure cooker, autoclaves. Yeah. They use that to do that. But because we have this freezer that does that so completely, we can pasteurize in it. Also, any gentle cooking process that we want to do, we can do in there. We could make soaps. We can, in the bags or buckets, we put it in there and it'll hold overnight. We can start to emulsify some wax and that type of stuff. I'm actually next week We're going to look at our black garlic that we talked about a little bit earlier. We're going to look at our black garlic. And once the black garlic is created, it still has the skin on it. We want to freeze it so that we can peel it way easier. So we're going to throw it in the freezer, and then all the shells should, and we've done this with other products, will just kind of crumble off at that frozen state. And that will make us, allow us to use the black garlic a little bit easier in puree and some other things that we're looking at doing.
Are we saying what piece of equipment we have? What?
That's the
what is it that we use?
That's an Earnox. The technology came out of Italy. They came up with a technology that really removes heat from things rather than blowing cold air over things. And where its first applications were in large food, like hospitals and that, but chefs quickly found out that they wanted smaller and smaller ones with this technology in their kitchen. So it's kind of gone from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think does everything. It proofs.
Yeah.
Sanitizes.
Yep.
Equal to our bucking machine price. It's something that we use so little. I mean, like you can literally put that thing to work almost every day with something really. To canning and
forgot about that.
Yeah. Canning stuff.
It worked out really good.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yep.
So where are we going? What's next? I know that's big on our mind when we chat about where are you going with all of this stuff? What have you done so far, and where do you see us going in the future with food?
So, as we're building this out, one of the things that we're focusing on is looking at local ingredients while developing world flavors. World flavors is really trending in America right now because we are the melting pot. It's really easy to look at other cultures and say, oh, they've been doing that really well. How can I isolate that? We call it Americanize it. So we got to dumb it down a little bit, maybe put a little extra salt, a little extra sugar.
Like an American curry, a little bit sweeter or something.
Add sugar, add extra salt to it. Mm-hmm. It's Americanized.
Yeah, right.
But we'll look at those flavors, and could there, I'll take kimchi, for instance. How do we round out kimchi? Maybe not every American is used to like a super fermented flavor in it. And probably that's why they don't like kimchi. But some people like cabbage. People like hot things. They like onion flavor. And that's basically what kimchi is without the fermentedness in it. So you asked me where we're headed. We're always looking at things on the farm that we can grow, that we can use. And then how do we get that product to have a new flavor to it, a trend to it, something that's just, I use the word one-off a lot, that people understand, but has a little bit of one extra ingredient to it.
Yeah, it stands out.
Trying to think. So that's kind of like our spicy maple drizzle, right?
Yeah.
That's a great example of it. Beautiful maple. Less than a mile from our farm. We're producing it on small batches with Montville maple. We grow awesome helio peppers. Yeah. They're great to grow. Our head grower just loves growing these peppers. They're abundant. So
they look awesome too. Yeah.
Yeah. That orange.
Yeah. They're so bright.
The Scoville level is pretty high.
Yeah. What are those like?
I think that they're around 300,000. I got to look that up again.
And what's a jalapeno that people think
maybe
of?
100. Ugh. Yeah. Or lower.
Yeah. So
60,000 maybe. I don't know. they're ripping.
Yeah.
But we do, because we're so busy in the summer.
Yeah.
We dry the peppers out.
Mm-hmm.
This time of year, we grind them up and we infuse them with maple syrup.
Yeah.
So really unique, but relatively simple, delicious flavors that we're trying to get together.
I pizza crust. And then somebody's mentioned like popcorn, because I know you were a pop guy with the garlic.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't even think about popcorn. I mean, it might be a sticky adventure, but like, I bet you it's probably really good though. I got to try that. I haven't done it. Yeah.
How about some popcorn drizzle?
How about ice cream? I know a lot of people like maple syrup on their ice cream. Do you think is that a thing? Can you get hot ice cream?
I actually saw they have
jalapeno ice cream.
They had, along those lines. You know those little Valentine candy, those hearts, those cinnamon ones? Yeah. There's an ice cream with that in them. So people are liking a warmer flavor with vanilla ice cream. Yeah. Definitely be delicious.
That's sweet hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good combination. I mean, I'm definitely loving that. Thank God it's not we might have a spicier version at some point. The one we have is pretty tame. I can only handle certain heats myself. Like before, I'm just like, oh, what did I do to myself? But so we played it a little safe with our first batch, but I think we'll probably hit a harder one at some point and see if people are interested in it. Cause I mean, people are into that stuff. It blows me away. I can't do it. I'm like a light medium guy, but
it's easier for me to make people cry with hot pepper than it is to make it tame for a lot of the time.
Right.
But people love it.
Yeah.
I'm not like that at all. I just cannot. I sweat when I eat ketchup.
Yeah. Right.
That's spicy for me.
Yeah.
So it's but that's a challenge. That's huge. That makes so much sense to be able to make not only have already a concept, and we can make two different variations out of it.
Right. Yeah. At SKUs, and it's great that we're helping local companies, and that's something that, as a company we're trying to do. I mean, we don't do it all. We don't grow it all, but we'd like to support people who are in our area as well with products and get some exposure to them as well. As much as we like to do, it feels like we do everything here, but we don't, we don't have animal products per se, chickens and that kind of stuff. So that's something that, maybe in the future is on our thing. It's probably doubtful. We'll probably always have somebody else that will do it for us. But hopefully they're doing it the right way and it makes sense for everybody to do it. But
did we ever get an answer? Now that we're getting kind of to the end here of the question all chefs hate to answer. Did we ever actually get an answer on that?
No. And that was the point. But what is a gripe of yours? I mean, as a chef, people gotta come up to you all the time. Like, just give me something. And tell us what you said earlier. Cause you're like,
so everybody asks it. It's not like the one guy that, wants to just ask a lot of questions. Everybody, it just rolls off their tongue. Like, so what's your favorite dish to make? Yeah. And I'm like,
cereal.
And like when I get together with my other chef buddies or whatever, like, so what's your favorite dish to make? And it's just like, it's a joke. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because we don't look at the life like our life like a dish. I think, I look at it and I usually try to talk around it. And what I talk about is my favorite ingredients that I'm seeing coming out of the garden. Something that has interested me as a trend in the industry or something like that, more than I think, than just a dish. But
Yeah,
right. It has been kind of like a pet peeve for chefs for years.
Is it different than what's your favorite meal, or is that the same question?
That's a completely different question. My favorite meal is anybody that cooks it for me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like, you know, that's why I said cereal. Like, what's your favorite dish? Because like you cook so much.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you're always cooking for other people. It's different when you're just like you're probably just like, just the easiest thing sometimes is like, and you don't care. Maybe you do or not, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the massage lady who that's all she does for work, you know, and like I feel bad for her husband because he's never going to get a massage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he probably dated her because thinking he was going to get a massage.
Right.
And it just never happens.
Right.
It jokes on him. Sorry, I'm going to report to HR with that one too. I don't know if that was appropriate or not, but it could have been anybody, vice versa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right.
I totally knew where you're going. But yeah, that would be that'd be different than, you know, different way to ask it, but way more palatable.
I got to tell you, my favorite thing though, of something that you made earlier that I think could be its own sauce if we could figure out a kitchen at some point here, but was your black garlic aioli.
Oh, yeah.
And in that little squirt bottle, it's just like hitting it with everything, you know, and it was, oh my God. You know, here's the thing I love about food that I'm really starting to appreciate as like getting a better palate in my life and experiencing new things is that. And, you know, how food builds that memory or experience. And I think that's kind of like how I talk about it with you guys sometimes. Like, how do we give people this amazing experience? Like, I'll never forget, like, how did I go through my whole life not having this black garlic in my life before? And I just remember how profound it was for me. It was just like, it's like, you know, like, I don't know if it's a piece of candy you've never had or just this experience that it's an amazing thing. This is something that we all humans do 3 times a day, or if not more.
Right.
Food is so ingrained into us. You know, it's a kind of a challenge. I worked with a guy too, and he real quickly said that, you know, I was like, that's what he wanted to do his business because people have to do it 3 times a day, you know? And
yeah,
but I can imagine it gets a chore sometimes. And that's why couples have a hard time deciding on what food options they're going to eat, right?
What they're going to eat, what they're going to do.
Especially in our little town. It feels like we talk about it as Groundhog's Day. You know, it's how do you...
I love this area, but it is sometimes a little challenging.
It is.
To get a quick bite and something that's new.
Yeah. Yeah. So. It's hard. Well, I think that was a great podcast today. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to be doing more of this stuff too on some other specific topics. Yeah. It was always great to introduce you to everybody. And thanks, Lee, for helping us out today.
Yeah.
Yes, it was great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.